I think this is unbelievable, how they politicize something like this. They tried to make the run at the Republicans, that the Republicans cut the CDC's budget. They didn't. But who cares if they did, since the CDC's doing things it's not even supposed to do, wasting millions and millions of dollars on crap. And this has nothing to do with money. To have the right policies in place, to have the right procedures in place on the border, on flights. Ebola isn't homegrown, ladies and gentlemen. Ebola is an import. Now, it seems to me if we're going to fight terrible drugs getting into this country, which is fine, I agree with that. If we're going to fight weapons coming into this country from other countries, okay, good. Well, why wouldn't we stop people from coming into this country who are carrying, in essence, potentially weapons of mass destruction, wittingly or unwittingly, whether they love us or hate us? Why wouldn't we do that? Is that not common sense? I'm going to tell you something. As I was prepping for the show and digging and digging and digging, which is what I do, research, I found the 1903 protocol for immigration reviews of individuals coming into the country, in this case Ellis Island, 1903, by way of ships. And I want to discuss this with you a little bit because it's quite amazing. You hear people say, all the time, you hear people say, we're a nation of immigrants, we've always had immigrants. Really? And what did we do as a nation of immigrants? What did we require people to do? What tests did we require of them? What standards did they have to meet before we would allow them to come into the country and stay in the country? There is a history here. We have never, ever, I've said it before and I want to underscore this, we have never, ever, in modern American history, in over a century, accepted the fact that people can just walk across the border and then all of a sudden they're wards of the state. All of a sudden they're our responsibility. We have never accepted that. We always wanted to know who they are, where they came from, what their intentions are, if they're ill, if they're going to be a drag on society. Do they have a job? Where are they going to go? We had to ask all those questions. Many of you who are second or third generation in this country or more, your ancestors had to go through that process. They couldn't just step on American soil. Here I am. Welcome me. I'm not going to have enough time in this segment to go through some of the requirements in 1903 before people were allowed to formally enter the country. Immigrants. But I want to demonstrate to you that when people say, we're a nation of immigrants, what's the problem? This would never have been tolerated, what's going on today. Never. And the fact that it's bipartisan, that the Democrats push it and the Republicans accept it, is really destructive of the nation. No, this has never been the way. It has never been the way. Where illegal aliens have a higher place in terms of virtue and nobility than the American citizen who has created this culture and this society and funds this government. And I bring this up now because it all gets back to the same problem, the border. And we have diseases coming into this country that we conquered and never heard of before. It's absolutely appalling. And isn't it interesting, there's very, very little talk about this enterovirus, this D68, which has killed many, many young kids in this country, many school-age children. Notice that the television networks, the radio news networks, they don't dig into this. Where does it come from? Well, much of it comes from Central America, but they won't report it. Now, I don't know how much more we're going to tolerate this from our own government, from our own institutions. We're being lied to, we're being deceived, and these things are going on without our approval. We don't want people coming in here who have these communicable diseases, a 70% death rate. We don't want to spread Ebola in this country, or this D68 virus in this country, or tuberculosis in this country. We don't want our children in our schools facing these exotic diseases. You know, we are a civilized society. We are a wealthy nation. We didn't just become wealthy. We didn't just become civilized. We embraced a certain set of values and beliefs and promote a certain set of principles, which the rest of the world ought to give a try. We are not the repository, ladies and gentlemen, of all the problems, all the ills, all the diseases, all the people of the world. Because no society can survive like this. None. And then we have the cancer, the rot from within, that balkanizes us, that tears at our institutions. We have a central government that's becoming all-powerful with tentacles in every direction, driven by ideology, driven by its own insatiable appetite, and utterly incompetent. The Department of Education, people will fight like hell to keep it, and they don't even know what it does. And as I've said many times before, many of these departments, their names are the opposite of what they do. Department of Education doesn't spread education. It hinders it. The Department of Energy doesn't create energy. It hinders it. The Department of Agriculture doesn't grow a damn thing. It hinders it. And we go down the list. The Department of State. Now that's pretty funny. That should be changed to the State of Confusion. The only one that works, if it's funded and supported properly, or one of the few, is the Department of Defense. But the liberals hate the Department of Defense. And let me suggest to you, if you hate the Department of the Defense, you hate your country. I really think it's that simple. Let's just use some common sense, ladies and gentlemen. If you know there is a deadly disease, 70% of those who get it die, if you know its origin, and if you know it can be carried by people coming into this country, why wouldn't you prevent it? Why wouldn't you prevent it from coming into the country? This is the question I have for the president, for his party, and let me add Mr. Boehner and Mr. McConnell, since to the best of my knowledge they haven't proposed a damn thing. Our political leadership in this country isn't leadership at all. All they know how to do is expand government, to tax us, to borrow, to create more programs, to raise money, to run for re-election, to try and destroy anybody who gets in their way and dares to challenge them. But they don't know how to run anything because the government's gotten too big. Oh, they'll hold press conferences. They'll hold meetings. They'll put out press releases. They'll do photo ops. They'll show up on the Sunday shows. They'll show up on the cable shows. But they won't do a damn thing. Now, I was saying in 1903, I have in front of me the inspection process at Ellis Island. It starts by pointing out that inspection of our immigrants may be said to begin in Europe. The migrant usually buys his steamship ticket to his native town from an agent or sub-agent of the steamship company. The agents of the best steamship lines are held responsible by the company for the passengers they book for America. And if they ship one of the excluded classes, they are likely to lose their agency. Oh, yes, we had excluded classes. This makes the agent examine the applicants for tickets, and probably quite a large number of defectives, this is their language, not mine, are refused passage by agents of the first-class lines. These defectives then usually try some less particular and smaller lines, take chances of escaping inspection at the Canadian-Mexican borders. The next scrutiny to which the immigrant is subjected is that of the steamship authorities at the port of embarkation. This was formerly a perfunctory examination and is still. The strict enforcement of our laws, and especially the imposition of $100 fine for bringing to our ports any ease of a contagious character, have occasioned some improvement in the inspection made by ship's doctors at European ports. At the port of embarkation, the immigrants' names are recorded upon lists or manifests, each list containing about 30 names. And after each name, the steamship officials are required by law to record answers to a certain number of queries related to the immigrant. Section 12 of the Act of 1903 provides that the manifest shall state and answer the questions at the top of the manifest sheet. Number 1, the full name, age, and sex. 2, whether married or single. 3, the calling or occupation. 4, whether able to read or write. 5, the nationality. 6, the race. 7, the last residence. 8, the seaport of landing in the United States. 9, the final destination, if any, beyond the port of landing. 10, whether having a ticket through such final destination. 11, whether the alien has paid his own passage or whether it's been paid by any other person or by any corporation, society, municipality, or government, and if so, by whom. 12, whether in possession of $30, and if less, how much less. 13, whether going to join a relative or friend, and if so, what relative or friend, and his name and complete address. 14, whether ever before in the United States, and if so, when and where. 15, whether ever in prison, or almshouse, or an institution or hospital for the care and treatment of the insane, or supported by charity. 16, whether a polygamist. 17, whether an anarchist. 18, whether coming by reason of any offer, solicitation, promise, or agreement, expressed or implied, to perform labor in the United States. And 19, What is the alien's condition of health? They wrote, mental and physical, whether deformed or crippled, and if so, for how long and from what cause? The master or first officer and the ship's surgeon are required by the same law to make oath before an immigration officer at the port of arrival that the list's manifests are to the best of their knowledge and belief true, and none of the aliens belongs to any of the excluded classes. Wow, we're a nation of immigrants. Alien identification cards. Say it's not so. Each alien is furnished with a card with his name, the number of the list on which his name appears, and his number on that list. The cards of minor children are given to the head of the family. These cards are valuable and necessary for identification and facilitate inspection at the port of arrival. Inspectors boarding of ocean liners. And it goes on. Medical examinations at Ellis Island. Do tell. The medical examination at Ellis Island is conducted according to a system which is the result of many years of development. It's 1903. The doctors work in pairs and divide the inspection between them. The immigrants, coming in single file, are examined for certain defects by the first doctor, who detains each one long enough to keep a space of 10 to 15 feet between the immigrants. The second doctor, placed about 30 feet from the first, disregards that part of the examination entrusted to his colleague and confines his examination to such defects as are not looked for by the first doctor. The file of immigrants makes a right-angled turn just as it reaches the second doctor, and this enables the examiner to observe the side and back of the passenger in the shortest time possible. It goes on. Routine exam. They look at the eyes. They look at the feet. And they go in this way: lameness, deformity, defective eyesight are detected. The gait and general appearance suggests health or disease to the practiced eye. Aliens who do not appear normal are turned aside, with those who are palpably defective and more thoroughly examined later. And it goes on and on. Aboard a special inquiry. What else do they have here? We're a nation of immigrants, ladies and gentlemen. They have here importation of unfit immigrants. They're deported. The case is so certified, the law is mandatory, and the medical certificate is equivalent to exclusion, the board simply applying the legal process necessary for deportation. What? No administrative law judges, no appeals, no lawyers handed to them? None. Aliens certified by the medical officers as suffering from disability, like to domain them public charges, are also held for examination before the Board of Special Inquiry. There are no appeals. There are no lawyers. Nothing. We're so much more civilized now. People can come in here illegally with Ebola, spread Ebola among the healthcare workers at a hospital. We're so much more civilized. People can come into this country, dirt poor, some with illnesses, some illiterate. I mean, after all, the people who came here over the summer from Central America, according to their own country, they were the poorest of the poor, the sickest of the sick. And way back when, in 1903, Mr. Producer, most of them would not have been accepted at Ellis Island. Isn't that amazing? I just thought you'd want to know.